Our desire, we know that our role is to come alongside you during this time and try to resource you and give you as much as we can to help you through this time. And certainly one of the big challenges is around finances. So last week on Tuesday, we had a Zoom with the pastors about technology as people were trying to figure that out. And then on Thursday, we had one about Holy Week and Easter planning. And then today and Thursday, we'll be circling around this topic. So a lot happening around the CARES Act that got passed on Friday, and just managing of budgets as we are looking at how offerings are working the last couple of weeks, as I'm sure all of you are on top of. So we have two special guests with us that are going to be helping us through this conversation. And Dawn and I will play more of a facilitation role. Rollie Peterson, who is with National Vice President of Real Estate Services and National Covenant Properties. Many of you know him and have worked with him with loans and other things, and he is a huge, huge asset and dear friend to the Pacific Northwest Conference. So thank you, Rollie, for being with us and preparing this presentation. And I'm hoping that Brian Whitaker is on here as well. Is Brian on here? B-Dub. Oh, yes, I see you. I see you. Brian Whitaker is the treasurer for the conference and has been so for about 50 years. It feels like 50 years, right, Brian? And he is the chair, the current chair, outgoing chair of First Covenant Seattle. And so he's got a lot of hands-on perspective from both the conference end and as we're looking at things, as well as how things are shaken out there at First. Okay, so I'm just going to hand it over to Rollie, and Rollie has some slides that he wants to share with us, and we'll go in from there. But how about if I just say, go ahead.
Oh, just a number of people haven't joined the call. So I just want to say I've been muting people if you're not muted. And Greg mentioned at the beginning that if you have a question or comment, use the chat function, and he and I will monitor that and anyway, try to address your questions. So go ahead, Greg.
Great. All right, Rollie, we're handing it over to you.
All righty. Well, thank you for getting me on this call. I have been immersed in this for about 3 days now, and the information does change daily. I did a little presentation to the Pacific Southwest Conference on Saturday, and you are getting the updated version from that one because we found out some information from when that call happened, and things will be changed.
What Rollie is trying to say is that we are better than the Pacific Southwest Conference.
You're getting.
I hear a muted amen.
I need to be careful. You know, I love all my conferences.
Yes. I do. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Yep. So what I'm going to try to do today is to share with you what I know, give you avenues for where you can find more information, and always know that you can call or email me later. I don't pretend to be an expert, but I do try to find the information as well as we can and introduce you to where the most of the information can be found. But so feel free to use the chat, as we said earlier, to issue questions, and they'll alert me of the questions so that we can try to answer them for you as we go. So why don't we, with that, start on the first slide.
Oh, I guess I do have to play it, sorry.
All right, you have to play it that way. Okay. Well,
yeah, I'll play it.
All right. The if you want to just click several slides, then you can just get them all out there. The CARES Act of 2020 that was voted in and signed by the president on Friday night, I think late he signed it, and provisions of it allow for churches and camps to be included. This is unusual for these kind of programs, even though this is facilitated by the Small Business Administration. Churches are not eligible for Small Business Administration disaster loans, but this is a special provision outside of that. As such, things are being created as we speak for this program, which is why we don't have all of it available. What we'll get through and kind of tell you a little bit of how churches can and should apply for these funds. You know, what you can do, and if you haven't done so already, do reach out to your local bank. I have found out today that some of the bigger banks like Bank of America and Chase are going to have the applications available on Friday. So I also have learned yesterday that there was a webinar with the SBA that the banks got involved in either Friday or Monday. So they're all learning about this process, but it should be available at your local bank. And how that's going to function, I don't know yet, but your local bank should have some information for you. If they just direct you to the SBA, you need to go to another bank because you can't get this loan directly from the SBA. What I have found out on calls that I've listened in on is that the local banks do receive a fee from the SBA for doing these loans. So they're not getting any money from you, but they are getting some money from the SBA. So it is beneficial for them to do it. And it will come in the form of a lower interest loan by your local bank. I've heard reports that it's guaranteed by the SBA. I don't know that detail yet on it, but it is a low interest loan coming from your local bank. If we can go to the next slide. So how much can we borrow? This is something I've been able to get a good handle on. And it requires some work on your part as a church. And I did today get my hands on a spreadsheet to help calculate this for you. And we can make that available after the call if you just let us know. What you need to do is gather your payroll costs for the last 12 months and get the average monthly cost of your payroll. And these payroll costs include payments that you might be paying on 1099 to contractors. They would include all your payroll expenses with the exception of federal income tax. So you would just have to back that out. There's another provision in there where if you have employees that their combined benefit package is over 100,000, it's capped at 100,000 when you're figuring out a monthly average for that. So so this is work that you can do now, even before the application is out there. If you have a payroll service that you work with, have them print you out a payroll record, and you can work from that report. But just get that information together, because this is how they figure out how much of a loan you can get, and it's 2.5 times whatever that monthly average payroll cost is. So that's the amount, and then you can use that money for payroll costs. You can use that money for facility expenses such as utility and debt payment. And between that, over that 2-month period, you should be able to justify use of that 2.5 times that figure. I'm going to hit the next slide. So there's an example. If you're 12,000, times 2.5, you would be eligible for a $30,000 loan. Now this is the interesting provision of this, is that 100% of this loan is forgivable. And the way the calculation works is they take a look at the period of time between February 15th of June 30th, 2019. They take a look at your FTEs during that time and compare it with your FTEs from February 15th to June 30th, 2020. Now, if your FTEs are greater than your FTEs in 2019, you're eligible up to 100% of it being forgivable. They have a justification on this in that they want to make sure that you do use it for the intended purposes. So I'm not sure how they're going to verify this. Either you're going to sign a statement that says, I've used this for the right purposes, and you have the records just in case they ask for them, or you have to show proof that you actually used the money for those purposes.
Rollie?
But yes.
This is Dawn. May I just interrupt you for a moment? What is included in those payroll costs? For instance, do we know yet if housing allowance or benefits are included in that calculation?
Yes, housing allowance and benefits are included. For example, your housing allowance is money that's being paid out as it's money, it's an expense that the church is incurring. The only difference with housing allowance is that it's just the way that the individual recipient of it is filing their taxes accordingly. So housing allowance as a number is included in that as you're calculating. The only thing that I've seen that is not is if you are receiving any federal benefit of any kind, that is deducted from that number.
Okay, and pension contributions?
That's included.
Included, okay.
Yep, all of that.
And we have a person asking about what if the person was, I guess it's saying a new hire that didn't exist in early 2019, a new start? I'm not quite sure if that's
well,
the right question.
The individual shouldn't matter. What they're looking at is specific FTEs.
Oh,
So
they corrected it and said new church. That wasn't.
If it's a new church, I've seen as long as they've been effective by January, you could take an average of even January and February for your previous number.
Okay, thank you.
I know this is a lot of information, so there might be several questions, so I'll pause for a minute if you have some that we can answer. I saw a question that said, what if there is a reorg? Is that?
Right.
You're still the same entity, I would assume. That's probably one that we would just have to take that maybe offline and get some more details behind the reorg. Now, there's also been lots of questions on what is an FTE. And I've got in there 1 FTE equals 40 hours. And, I've seen, individuals have said it's 30 hours, but when you look at the actual ruling, what they state is that they take a look at 2,080 hours for the year, divided by 52. And when you do that, it comes out to 40 hours. So when you're calculating your FTEs, what I would do is you have a number of employees that you classify as full-time employees, whether you say they can work 37.5 hours or 40 hours or whatever you say. Just consider those 1 FTE for each full-time designated employee that you have. Then take a look at your part-time employees, figure out how many hours they're working a week, add those all up together and divide by 40, and that'll give you the other FTEs that you need. And if you're just consistent that way, I think it'll work well for you. Is that any more questions?
So pension included and medical benefits, right?
Yep.
Isn't
Yep.
health coverage is included.
Personnel cost.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep, and I'll give you a worksheet after this, which makes it fairly easy for you to put all that information in, and it'll even calculate the FTEs for you as well.
Yeah, and so that was my note in the chat, everybody. Just office@pacnwc.org. Let us know and we'll send that to you.
Now, there was a question is if your FTEs are lower in 2020 versus 2019. If that is the case, there'll be a small percentage of that loan that is not forgivable. And then that would be on a repayment plan over a 10-year period. At a low interest rate, which I think the maximum rate they can charge is 4%.
All right, why don't we keep going?
Okay, let's move on to the next slides. So in summary, if we can hit all these. So the money is available now for your churches. What you need to do is calculate your payroll costs over these next 12 months, and we can give you that worksheet that's going to help you out on that one. Have all your documentation completed and organized before you go to your bank. And I would say before you go to your bank, I'd say before you contact your bank, because I don't think it's going to be necessary for you to rush right down to your bank physically. You should be able to contact them by phone. And the couple of banks that I've seen are already just being able to just take your name and get you on a list to be able to do that. A couple of other questions that I've had since this has been put together is, will taking money from the government cause you to have to comply with what the government has to say? From what I heard, as recent as yesterday, there was a call with some lenders and church organization folks that talked with some of the senators that put this together, and the answer was no. So, and there's nothing in I'm told there's nothing in the legislation that says differently, but that's all I can inform you of that one. The other question I've gotten is, should I take the loan if we really don't need it? And I would say that's your decision. There is not enough money to go around to everybody that I think needs it. So I would say if you are a church that's well off, it may be better to let this money be for somebody else. But that is your decision on that one.
Rollie, a question. Do you
Yes.
need to use the bank where your accounts are? We have a pastor saying they have a member who works in another bank and it might be a smoother process if they go there.
The only reason I suggest you going to your regular bank is they have the banking relationship, and it'd be a quick way to get the funds, because I think they're going to try to do it electronically. So if you have a member in your church that works at another bank that you feel you can get it done smoothly, you're not prohibited from going there. You just may have to open up a deposit account to make that a little bit more smoothly.
Okay. And the money that you receive, we understand if you use it, it will be forgiven.
If you use it, you have a chance for it to be forgiven. It's not an automatic. I mean, you have to go through the work at the end of 6/30 and verify the information that they're looking for. And the key things that they're looking for is that you didn't reduce payroll, or you didn't reduce your FTE count to a level that was significant, that you actually used the money for what it was intended to be used for. And if you do both of those, if you keep your current staff and you use the money for what it was used for, then I would say you've got a good chance of it being 100% forgiven. But I would say nothing is a guarantee until we actually see the final paperwork.
Great, thank you.
Does that clarify a lot of the questions that are out there?
So far.
So what I would tell you is, I see the question that just came, is it a first come, first served basis? And I would say you're probably right. That's why it's important to get in there quickly. We will at National Covenant Properties be providing you as much information as we can, as soon as we can. If the denomination has set up a location on their website where they're collecting pertinent information and trying to keep that up to date. We're trying to keep it pretty centrally located. And I think that's the key, because there could be an issue where we have misinformation. So we're trying to communicate through channels such as this and trying to keep things uniform so people know what we're speaking about.
Yeah, there's been no language around prioritization, and even trying to conceive how any entity would prioritize all the different loans would be near impossible.
No.
First come, first serve probably makes sense. Yeah.
First come, first serve is probably the best way to keep it happening. The website that I'm getting a lot of my information from, or the entity, is called Vanderbloemen. If you've heard of that, it's a good thing to stay connected with. I've just felt that site has churches in mind, has not Christian nonprofits in mind, and their information seems to be consistent. There's just a plethora of websites now offering information, and we just have to be careful.
So Rollie, just a clarifier, because questions are coming about interest rates. So really, this is a grant if everything is done right and everything works out with the FTEs. Otherwise, it then turns into a loan, which we don't know the exact interest rate, but are seeing it capped at 4% right now.
Yeah, what we do know is the maximum interest rate is 4% and the term is 10 years. That is what we know. I can't.
But on the amount that we do use and is recovered by the FTEs, that's a grant. There's no interest. That's free money, basically, right?
It will be in the end if you follow through all the paperwork, right. But it's going to be called a loan all the way through. But
sure.
And one thing to remember, if you do apply for this, you need to go through the normal approval processes in your church, for whatever you have your process in place for accepting a loan. You need to make sure you follow those steps, and not call it a grant, but it is a loan that is forgivable. I mean, that's the term you should probably use when you're getting it up on your system. And what I'd like to also add to that is, if you have a loan with NCP, NCP currently has a restriction from outside borrowing other than NCP. Well, since we are familiar with this program, all you have to do is let us know that you are participating in it. Any approval from us won't be unreasonably withheld.
Okay, lots more questions here. Documentation needed. Greg, does that come from you?
As far as the 501c3 information, that needs to come from Chicago, actually. So, Rollie, do you have any update on that? We've been sending folks to headquarters, to offices.
Yeah, they can get it from Chicago. Since we don't know what the application is going to state and require, it's not specifically a loan for 501c3 organizations. It is available to other small businesses and so on. So whether they'll be looking for your official designation or just your valid incorporation status, we don't know as of yet. But if you do need to have your 501c3 letter as part of the application, you would contact Chicago.
And our credit union's okay?
credit unions should be okay as long as they have the ability to work with the Small Business Administration, and most of them do.
Let's see.
And that
A lot
question,
of
if
questions.
churches have their own 501c3, then you don't need anything from Chicago.
So, folks, as far as not being able to gather as a membership, you do have the ability to conduct meetings virtually. And so that is true for the churches in our conference. It may not be true in other conferences, but our state laws make it available to you as churches to do online meetings. And so unless your particular bylaws forbids that, you are allowed.
Does this loan apply to funding missionaries as well?
You
I
mean,
think so.
I'm not sure what that question is. If it's part of your budget expense, I would say the proceeds doesn't apply for that. It's really only related to your payroll expenses, unless you have a missionary on your payroll. That would be the only way it would apply.
There's a question about suspending mortgage payments for the short term. I think that would be a question to talk to NCP about, right?
That would be a separate question directly to NCP. What I can say is our board is, from NCP perspective, is meeting on April 9th, and we'll be talking about many different options, but we don't have anything we can share today.
Anybody do you happen to know what the maximum amount of dollars that is available in the aggregate, for small business loans? I don't know what was passed in the bill.
It's in the bill, and it was pretty big, and I think it was a number like $2 million or something like that.
Okay.
The max available for individual. The max available as far as this bill goes is $350 billion. That's set aside for this.
Okay.
Hey, can I jump in with one comment about the question that just came up?
Please.
Yep.
So what I've been talking to quite a few banks here in Seattle, and you can imagine they are trying to figure this all out this week. Many of there are some documents that are on the SBA website. It was crashed about 2 weeks ago with the online application. So I think reaching out to your bank makes a ton of sense, but just give them a little time because they don't know how to answer these questions that well either. I've been in contact with quite a few banks, and they are struggling to figure out how to make this all work and what process they're gonna go through.
Correct.
And there's a question about where do you find the documentation needed before contacting the bank?
Well, I think there's only a form that's on the SBA website, but I think they're going to evolve this, and each bank that's an SBA bank will likely have their own form or process. That's what I was trying to get to.
Yeah, I would get the form from the bank that you're going to be working with. What we do know is you need to do is to get a spreadsheet together that has all your payroll expenses taken care of, and that's something we can provide for you. I mean, that's the kind of homework that you need to do. There may be some additional documents that you need, but we don't know that yet. We don't want you scrambling for extra stuff that you don't need. It's definitely not the application that you pull off of the SBA website. That's much too detailed for what we're hearing.
Okay, one more time, can you clarify the interest expectations on this loan?
The max interest that is in the document is 4%, but it could be less when it actually rolls out.
And you're still required to pay interest even on the part that will be forgiven?
Well, I mean, that's some details that I'm not quite sure on, because you're gonna state on June 30th what, you know, your application for being forgiven. I would think that you're not paying any interest on the stuff that's going to be forgiven, because they're not going to be requiring payments this year anyway.
Hey, Rollie, I was just on an ECFA webinar, and in terms of unforgiven loans, they said payments are deferred for at least 6 months, maybe up to 1 year. The maximum maturity of any unforgiven loan would be 10 years, interest rate not to exceed 4%, and there is no prepayment penalty. And they kind of talked about a strategy, I guess I'll use that term, where if you have unused money that would not be forgiven, you would have at least till the end of December this year. If you save the cash, which you should if you haven't used it, just pay the loan off. There's no penalties.
So I asked that question. I just want to clarify. So as a finance professional, right, if I take out a loan, interest starts accruing immediately. So even if I don't pay back till December, typically the way a loan would work is interest would be added on a periodic basis throughout the course of the year. So even if it's 4%, by the end of the year, some interest is still going to have accumulated. So I guess when we call it a grant, that would imply there is no interest at all. If we're talking about a loan where the basis is forgiven, that's different than a loan where basis and interest is forgiven. So I don't know if we have that level of detail, but I don't want to make the expectation for my church that if we use it all towards payroll, it's all going to go away if we're still liable for the interest accrued over the 9 months to basically pay the bank for servicing us.
Yeah, we don't have that level of detail as of yet. What I'm understanding though is if you submit all the paperwork at the end of June 30th that says, and you've complied with everything, that they talk about no expenses going back to the church. So this is not a normal loan that you would get from your bank. So I would have to believe that you're not going to be paying any interest if they're going to forgive the whole thing.
Okay, thanks.
So you're going to know early on, you're going to know on June 30th how much you can have forgiven. And it's up to you whether or not you want to start paying on that thing or pay it off.
Okay, Rollie, I did have one comment that it's a little hard to hear you. I don't know if it's possible to get a little closer.
I'll try to speak louder at all times.
Okay, thanks. All right, let's keep going.
So
we should probably shift to the second topic.
yeah.
And I'm sure there's still lots of questions on this current topic, but if we can, we'll just collect them on chat, and whatever we don't get answered, we'll try to get something out with Rollie answering those.
What I can let you know is that Vanderbloemen is having a live webinar tomorrow on their Facebook page at 1 o'clock Central Time. So that's 11 o'clock your time. If you want to go to their Facebook page, you can probably get on that and get some fresh dated information tomorrow.
And I put their website in the chat. So if you're unfamiliar, check the chat for the website.
All right, this part, and Brian, you pipe in whenever you want to. But you guys have all been trying to manage your cash flow during this time of crisis. And, I might be redundant in this process, but it's just important for you to know your income sources, know your fixed expenses, and know your reserves. These are the things that you need to concentrate on. We can hit the next slide. And your income sources, pay attention to your online giving. You're all doing virtual services on Sunday. Make sure you talk about it, that people can know about the online giving. If you don't have online giving by now, reach out to me or reach out to the conference and Greg, and we'll get you connected to where you can get online giving set up. We've seen a good spike in online giving for our churches, so that's a good thing. But you're still going to have a population that is just going to give you, checks. Not necessarily going to be giving you cash now, but they'll be giving you checks. You just need to set up processes for those. Those of you that are receiving preschool income or other lease income, I feel your pain right now, and that's a big vacuum that you're trying to get over with. But it's important to know where your income is and is not coming from, and what gaps you need to fill. We hit the next slide. On your fixed expenses, this is something you need to pay attention to. We really believe it's important for you to take care of your employees, take care of your staff as best you can. When you're looking at your facility, look at the minimum cost to maintain the facility to cover debt. You know, try to hold off on any capital improvements if you're shy on cash right now, and just keep that building functioning. Even though you're not using it that much, you've got to keep certain systems operating, but try to be as efficient as possible. Your mission expenses that you have out there. I know there was that question about, you know, supporting your missionaries. Your mission needs your support now more than ever during this time of crisis. So try not to look at that budget item as a discretionary item when you're looking through on things. I think the biggest flux that you're going to be having on expenses is how you're doing ministry. Because when you set out your budget to begin with, you had all kinds of things planned for what your ministry expenses were going to be and what you were going to be doing. Now you're trying to do it, shifting everything to online and virtual, and it's changing how you're spending money. That's an area where you need to just, you know, that's where you can control most of your discretionary type expenses going forward. Hit the next slide. Reserves. I think some of you are probably learning that operational reserves weren't just something that your accounting people talked about. It's really a need that's out there. Those of you who have really great operational reserves right now are utilizing them and probably understanding the benefit of it, and have probably looked at those. How come we're setting so much money aside? You know, when we could use it otherwise. So this is a big bucket that often gets forgotten, but an important one to have. If through this process, every church realized that an operational reserve is important, I think we've won. Some of you have a mortgage reserve to use specifically for debt during a time of crisis. I think that's a good thing to have. And then the other reserve is a capital reserve for building repair or improvement. Now this is a reserve that I know some churches now are using some of that for their operational reserve in this time of crisis. But it's important to have all of these three reserves going forward. But when you enter a time of crisis like we are right now, it's important to know what you have in each of those buckets to manage accordingly. The next slide. So what I would like you to do, and I have sent out to your conference staff a document that we got from Capen and Kraus to help you prepare a monthly cash flow over 3 months or 4 months or 6 months, however you want to do that. It's important to try to readjust that if you haven't taken those steps already, to really look at it closely and see what you need to supplement from your reserves to make that happen. Communicating clearly to the congregation is huge. And I will tell you that churches never get in trouble for over communicating. So if you feel like you're mentioning something over and over again, I think that's okay. Because people are dying for information right now, and it's important to stay in touch with them, keep them updated on what you're doing. And if they complain about too much information coming from you, you've done a good job. Last thing, during a time of crisis, it's very important to centralize expense control. And that may mean some person or a couple of people are going to be overwhelmed with looking things over, but it's really one way that you can keep on top of things and reallocate funds as necessary and as quickly as possible. And let's hit the next slide. So lastly is I want you to, as I mentioned through this slideshow, is lean to your Pacific Northwest Conference for information. We'll be funneling things through there. Feel free to reach out to me at NCP and Real Estate Services. And if you haven't realized already, the Covenant has a website, is on their website, and they call it COVID-19 resources. And there's many resources in there, both financial resources and good help resources that are out there. And then what we talked about earlier, government programs and grants. Be alert to what's out there. And I think that's all I've got for today. So open it up to still more questions if there are any.
Are you okay with us sharing this slide presentation? Someone has
Absolutely.
asked if it's available. Okay.
Absolutely.
We are recording this as well, so we will make those available perhaps on our PacNWC website.
Rollie, one of the, just to maybe chime in on what we've done at the conference and then a little bit of what we've done at our church, if that's helpful.
Yes.
We had a special board meeting with the conference about a week and a half ago, and we ran several scenarios where we're looking at basically two points of reduction of 30 or 50% of giving to the conference, and then we ran scenarios of what were our basic costs that we needed to keep the conference functioning. We also did had some conversations about how can the conference help churches in this time of need. So we've been on top of this for a couple of weeks. One of the things that you can think about in terms of scenarios is, we are likely not going to be able to leave for the entire month of April, maybe May. So we've been trying to target zero to minimal amounts of outside revenue at our church to try to figure out how that might look on a recovery. So we're always doing somewhat of a optimistic or realistic scenario, and then we're trying to look at one that might be a little bit more what happens if this thing flares up and we're not able to leave until, let's say, later in the summer. So try to have a couple of scenarios. And we've also been talking at our church, we're trying to figure out when the right time to hold a special business meeting is. We kind of felt like we wanted to get everyone cared for. So we took care of our staff and made sure that they were all set up and felt comfortable with what we were going to do as a church. But I think probably in the next week or so, maybe if it's either before or after Easter, we're planning on holding a special business meeting. So I think the other thing I would say is, I think the question that we had for Rollie is right on. I will just say my concern for everyone in the conference is that there are going to be mortgages that are going to come due, and there are going to be revenue that's going to be lost. And I'll just say it, in my loving relationship with Rollie, I've said you guys need to have a plan, and we're hoping for them to have some type of a plan to help out. I know they will. But as you begin to do your modeling or things that you're looking at or concerns you have, let Greg or myself know, because we're trying to get a sense of what the scale is for our conference. We don't know how many people are, as we go through this in April and May and June, where are we running into issues? So I'll stop there. And if anyone that wants to ask questions, go for it.
Yeah, what I'd like to add is feel free to individually reach out to me on your current church situation, and we can talk about it further as well. We do need, it's important for you to have a plan and not just rely on others to fix it for you, but put a plan together that you can work with, and we can work with you on it. And we're all in this thing together. It's hard. I mean, our NCP staff has been working remotely for well, I've been working remotely now for 4 weeks in a row, and most of our staff, they're in their third week. It's been a challenge, but we welcome Zoom meetings where we can see faces, and we welcome, you know, having these good discussions. I'll give you a little tidbit on myself. My Sundays have been spent binge watching worship services. So I haven't quite gone to as many on the West Coast as I can, because that's going into my afternoon. But I've actually enjoyed some of your services on Mondays and Tuesdays when I just put the headphones on and listen to your services. So it's fun to have so many worship services online. I think I hit 5 live on Sunday. It was quite fun. So
Wow.
keep up the great work, all of you.
We have one question. Is NCP experiencing any liquidity issues or anticipating any financial stress that churches or others should be aware of that hold cash with NCP?
Well, good question. What I can tell you is that I received this news this morning. 2.5% of our assets are in the equity markets. So most of our money is out there and invested in churches and other things. So we're okay. You know, we're not liking these markets as much, you know, all along, but we're okay because we value our investors, and you know, our churches have been reaching out to us and we've been working with them. For those who have investments with us and wondering, you know, how are all the loans across the board? Right now, you know, everybody's paying, and so that's a good thing. It's not, but we are in touch with all of our loan customers and as many of our investors that call into us. So you keep us in our prayers. I mean, there's a lot of it's tough working remotely and being as responsive, and we try to be that way. But so far, so good.
It looks like that I am able to attach an attachment to the, I didn't realize that the feature was there. So out on the chat, you'll see the Excel spreadsheet that Rollie was referring to. But if you've already sent that email, Chris is already on it, I'm sure.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I don't see it yet, Greg. Did you put it to everyone just to make sure?
Oh, you know what? I think I sent it just to Bob. Bob Voss, you are an important person.
Winner.
Winner, winner, chicken dinner. Here we go. It's coming to you in 2 seconds.
Thank you, Greg.
There we go. You're welcome.
Greg, I just like
coming up?
I just wanted to jump in, and I think one of the things that you know, as a chair of a church and treasurer of the conference, I mean, what I'm curious about is beyond the human side of this, right? We're all worried about staff, worried about everyone's health. I mean, we're assuming that, but I would be curious to figure out. You can send emails to Greg or myself what you're worrying about. You know, we've done a lot of drills with our staff. We have a Zoom meeting every week with our staff and talk through how do we make sure we get the cash check, get the checks to get them cashed. We're still doing some of our Saturday morning breakfast in a very different format. So just curious, you know, if there's any financial concerns that are out there, I just would love to hear about them. You don't need, I mean, you can send them on the questionnaire if you want here. Just curious where everyone's heads are at right now.
Feel free to unmute and say something. That might be easier.
So I think, this is Russ Blake at Crossroads in Yelm. I think right now we are feeling okay financially, but we know it's going to really get thin. And so we want to understand how to navigate through those waters that are ahead of us. And so this is really helpful. Our staff is about 8 strong, and some of them are worried about being laid off. They just know that something's, push comes to shove. So we're going to do our best to prioritize our staff first. And in saying that, at the same time, right now our online giving is strong. It's not enough, but it's strong. But I just know human nature. When things get difficult, our folks are going to have to hold back just in order to, make their own rent and mortgage payments. So that's what we anticipate.
Hi, this is Rick Jameson. Again, I was on the ECFA webinar this morning and heard something interesting. So maybe you guys know this or not, but as you know, clergy and lay members of our churches, if they're laid off, they don't get unemployment insurance benefits from the state. With the CARES Act has actually opened that up in terms of the federal $600 a week unemployment. And as I understand it, you would still file through your state. The states are going to be scrambling, to change their websites to allow that. But that's what I heard today.
Yes. Thanks, Rick.
And just to clarify, in Oregon, actually, our clergy can receive unemployment benefits. I know of a couple situations when we've had pastors who are laid off. So I don't understand the details of that, but I know Oregon, it is possible.
Yeah, it is different state by state, so that's a good point.
Well, folks, we're about 5 minutes out. I'd just like to, if I can just have your attention still for a couple more minutes, just want to give you a sense of what's before us in the conference. And so we'll be doing this again on Thursday at 5:30. So if there are other leaders in your church, people that couldn't make this noon hour, we decided to try an after-hour offering as well. Rollie will be with us as well. I'm not sure if Brian can make it, but definitely Rollie will be on with Don and me. We are, despite what happens with Gather 2020, our leaders are still trying to decide what is going to happen with the denominational annual meeting. We should get word on that in the next few days. But despite what happens with Gather, we have decided as an executive board and as a staff to continue on with our virtual meeting. So we'll be on this Zoom platform for delegates. It'll be live stream for everybody else. And we've got a mechanism to cast our votes and engage the meeting. So if you could, I know you've got a gazillion things that you're managing right now, but if you could just make sure you've got delegates sending in your delegate credential cards to the office for that would be great. It's a shortened meeting. It's only going to be an hour or less, getting some of the basics done, but also for us just to celebrate and to break out into some spaces to be together around. So just want to give that reminder. We're hearing a lot of feedback from pastors and others on Zooms that they really want us to move forward. So there's just kind of a need for some semblance of normalcy and the continuity of our joint ministry together. But also we've gotten a couple of legal opinions about this. And the only real option we have outside of this would be to delay the meeting, which in the flow of all conference stuff and all of what you all do there on the front lines just really wasn't an option for us. So since Washington is allowing us to do a virtual meeting and our bylaws are allowing us to do a virtual meeting, we felt like that would be the best way to go forward. So send us your questions, any concerns, but just anticipate hearing more about that in the weeks to come. Okay. All righty.
Greg, this is Byron
Yes.
from you. Can you clarify again when the meeting date is and the time?
Yes. So it is the same day. So it'll be April 25th. And for you pastors on the call, the pastors, the Ministerial Association will be meeting at 9 o'clock. Okay, so pastors only, Ministerial Association, 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock. The annual meeting will start at 10:30. Okay, so 10:30 on April 25th, Saturday. Okay, and we'll get all the information. We'll have special information for the delegates that we get information about, and then general conferees. So one asterisk to that is it's going to be very important when you send in your delegate information that we have each delegate's email address so that they can receive specific instructions, a private ballot, that kind of thing. So not the church email, but the delegate's email. And all of that we'll be communicating further as we go forward here. Okay. Well, we are here for you, folks. Let us know if we can help in any way. As we close here, I'm just going to have our Associate Superintendent, Don Toloyo, close us in prayer and just pray a blessing over all of you as you guys continue to do good ministry out there.
Lord, thank you so much for these brothers and sisters here and all that they are carrying and all the work that they are doing, their leadership among their people. Lord, thank you for calling them to this place and time and giving, I know, the gifts that are needed. I pray and ask you, Lord of all, that you would grant us wisdom and discernment as we make decisions and choices about finances and loans and just the way forward, how to make even those day-to-day decisions of what we do and how we do it. Lord, we ask you to be our guide, to be our Lord, that your Spirit might lead us, and may you lead us into a renewal, a time where just our ministries flourish in a way that we couldn't even have expected, Lord, and that our people feel energized and engaged and ready to do the work, Lord, and remember that the harvest is plentiful and that there is work to be done. So, Lord, renew our hearts and spirits this day, and may we have much to celebrate in the future down the road, that we can rejoice over what you have done through this time. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, everybody. God bless.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks.